Polly Wales is a true renegade of jewellery design. Turning the perception of fine jewellery on its head, 20 years ago, Polly broke all the rules when she developed a whole new way of casting metal, which incorporated the actual gemstones into the process, something which was groundbreaking at the time and has since been widely emulated in the industry. Growing up in the UK, Polly built her business and brand and took it to the US in 2015, where it's gone from strength to strength. Testament not just to her incredible talent and vision as an artist, but also to her ambition and courage. Her bright, bold, joyful work has never stood still, and she has amassed a vast and loyal tribe of Polly Wales devotees, obsessed with collecting her intricate, powerful, and truly unique designs. In this episode, Polly shares why feeling like an outsider in the jewellery industry can be a huge advantage, why she loves breaking the rules, and how staying true to who you are makes running a successful creative business so much easier. Polly Wales, welcome to the GoldDust Podcast. Hi, Polly Wales. It's so lovely to see you. And we saw each other only a few weeks ago in London, and now you're in LA, of all places, which is obviously a far cry from here, where it's really drizzly and grey. How is LA?
I mean, that's a big question right now.
It is.
But this morning, the sun is shining and the weather's starting to turn, which is very nice. And it's all good if you just look at the sort of grain of sand in front of me.
What's it like as a Brit over there? Like, what's that like as an experience?
The one thing I did really notice was that when I moved here, I really sort of embraced my Englishness and my Britishness. And I think I felt quite frivolous about that. And I felt like, you know, as a country, we weren't really doing the things that we sort of said we were going to do, you know, and social services seemed to be, you know, down the pan and all of that kind of stuff. And I moved away from England and I realized that flawed as it is, there is a support network, and that without that support network, things are pretty scary for people.
So you're kind of leaning into your English, your mad English lady era.
Yeah, you know, and also we have such an incredible history of like demonstrating, of rebelling, of being punk as you like, you know, and I think that sort of really, those parts of me that I didn't think, that I knew were my very sort of essence, I also didn't sort of recognize in the culture of my country, and leaving the culture of my country. I really sort of, all of that resonated with me even more. And I recognized that that England is actually maybe truer to its word than you recognize when you're on the inside.
It's often the way, isn't it? When you kind of like leave something behind and you sort of feel like, I'm done with this. I've had enough of this. I'm going to go and seek something different or better. And then actually in retrospect, or with like, you know, without the sort of rose tinted glasses on of the new place that you've landed, you can see things differently. And so why did you move in the first place? Because you upped your whole family, which, you know, as a mother of 2 kids, I know that's like no mean feat. So you moved everyone over to the US.
Yeah. And their kids and their partners.
It's amazing.
My partner James has come up with a trite response, which is sunshine and money. But the truth of it was that, you know, when I graduated from the Royal College in 2006, I was lucky enough to be able to get funding to start doing trade shows in the US. And so I started coming over here and going to New York now, which is now called something else. But I started doing a trade show there. And the first time I did it, I was blown away. I came home, I think, with £7,000. It probably wasn't. It was probably £4,000 in sales. And it blew my mind, because trying to make that amount of money in the UK was nigh on impossible. And stores were coming up to me, writing orders and purchasing jewellery, which is very difficult to do in the UK culture of consignment.
And when was this? This was back in like
2007, I think, was the first time I did it. And it just built and it built and it built until we got to a point where I was like, do you know what? I think we could probably get a visa to go to America. And I reckon we could probably, move. And, we were sort of, I guess in comparison to now, young, footloose and fancy free. And it seemed like a great idea, So that's what we did.
So the customers and the business just led you over there because I guess that's where, well, like James says, that's where the money is. But is that perhaps then where your audience is? Is it mainly Americans who buy your work?
It is mainly Americans that buy my work, but I think if you think about the size of the country, there's sort of our demographic is we still have, we have a big following in the UK, we have a big following in Australia, and we have a big following here. And whether or not we do sort of many sales in Australia is sort of a different thing. But I think they're the sort of places where currently my work really resonates.
So for the benefit of those people who aren't actually watching us and who might not know what your work looks like, could you describe what your work looks like and what it is?
My work is very process-led. So I started experimenting when I was at the Royal College with trying to make pieces that changed over time as you wore them, exploring kind of this idea about our connection to an object and a moment of preciousness and a moment of perfection, and then the loss of that moment of perfection, and then what comes after, and whether we're more attached to things sort of in that state than we are in this sort of state of newness. And so I was trying to sort of explore that. And in that process, I started casting stones directly into metal. Initially, at that point, it was Swarovski, crystal, and silver. And these pieces came out, and I started sort of making them and exploring the world that those sort of objects lived in. So they were very eroded, very kind of organic looking, very sort of fluid in a lot of ways, quite sort of Etruscan, like dug up treasures, and that kind of thing. Sometimes now, people say they look like paint, the early pieces, classic pieces look like sort of cookie dough or something like that. And then, over the last 20 years, my journey has very much been about evolving that process and that technique and refining it and turning it from something that was extremely happenstance into something that is now sort of extremely highly refined.
Did you invent that process? Were you the first person to sort of work that way?
Yeah. I mean, there's sort of industry ways in which stones are cast into rings beforehand, but fundamentally, yes. So, and all of the sort of iterations of that come afterwards, the ways that I sort of figured out how to release the stones from outside of the gold and surface mount them and do encrusted things and do engagement rings and build claws and settings and all of that. Yeah, that's all from me.
You've called it the cast not set technique, which I remember first seeing your work, and I was trying to remember whether it was in person, and I think it might have been at that shop on South Moulton Street in London. Do you remember what was
Electrum?
Electrum, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing it and just being like, "What the hell is this? I hadn't seen like anything like it." So that was probably only about, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, maybe a bit less. But it's so unusual now to come across something that you haven't really seen before. So at the time, it was really like groundbreaking, I think. The cast not set process means that everything comes out looking different each time. After you kind of finished the experimentation and thought that you might want to, make this into a business, did you worry about how that was going to work? Like how you might be able to kind of create pieces in bulk or, sort of scale the business due to the fact that everything is kind of one of a kind?
Kate, that would suggest that there was foresight in it. any of my activities. And I think, I remember, this isn't sort of exactly an answer to your question, but it sort of leads to it. I remember I was making these pieces in silver, and I was doing all of this like other stuff that was sort of my bread and butter at the time, which was I was doing these sort of incredibly elaborate hand pierced, sort of big sort of gypsy hoop sort of style earrings. And that was how I was making my money. And I was selling those to Barney's and Anthropology and all of the kind of independent jewelry stores in America, and spending all of my time at the bench, like, hand piercing away. And then I was also making the pieces that I was truly passionate about. And I was casting them in silver with synthetic stones and, classic sort of one leads to two story. I cast one piece up in gold for a client. He wanted a wedding ring for himself, and it was black sapphire and white gold. And I had enough money from that to make a second one. And I took that to the next New York Now that I did.
Just that one piece as an example.
Yeah, I had the ones in silver, and then I had this one. Suddenly the penny dropped for everybody, and they were like, oh my God, I get it. Right. I understand what you're doing now. And so people started ordering from that. And then there was this very sort of tricky in-between period where I had to sort of explain to people, like, the stone's going to fall out. Like, this is going to change over time as you wear it, and it's not going to look like this forever. And, that sort of worked for a while until it got to a point where really I sort of realized, like, you can't build a fine jewelry business on this premise, And so then I had to sort of really sort of hone in how I made things. And it went on like that, sort of step after step. When I first made the rainbow, Celeste rings, which is, just got rainbow stones all the way around, I would just use whatever rainbow colored stones I had, and then people would get them. Be like, this is different from the last one. It's like, yeah. So, then you have to kind of iron out all of the kinks. And I think, that's been an uphill struggle all the way through what we do. Every single piece needs to be photographed. For the website, we can't just have, one stock image and then all of those iterations that come after it. But I think now, at this point, the stores that we work with and the clients that we have, they trust us to make things that live within the same world.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then I saw on your website, alongside the product, it says something like, this is a past example, or made to order pieces are past examples. This is not the ring you will receive, but it will be made to order for you. So that's quite a nice way of kind of positioning it, in that it's not actually going to look like this, but it's the only, it'll be just for you. So it's unique, which, yeah, I can imagine 10 years ago, store owners would be like, what do you mean? I'm not going to everything's not going to look the same.
Also, I started off then at that point just making huge amounts, by my standards at that point, huge amounts of inventory, and everything was one of a kind. And people would just buy what was available. So, the first day of trade shows would be this absolute sort of frenzy of people coming early and fighting to get the pieces that they wanted. And then...
So you brought all your stock with you, and it was sort of, this is what I've got, and when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah. But then it's very difficult really to tell from that process what pieces have more sort of longevity to them, So one thing sells, and you never know if you could have sold 10 of those things.
I see. Yeah, of course.
So then we had to sort of slightly shift again and sort of travel in a slightly different direction again.
So you're just kind of adapting and learning as you go. I guess when you're starting with such a process-driven art form, that's really the only way that you can that you can progress is just by tweaking and moving on and getting feedback. Did customers get it? Or did you get sort of like people returning the piece and saying like, oh, it doesn't look like how I thought it would look? Or do you feel like people now kind of understand?
I think people now understand. And also we try to edit out those people beforehand, like people who think that they're going to have control over that process. But really, that sort of bracket of what we do now is, although it's still, the confetti ring is still like one of our, it's still our top selling product after all of these years. And that probably won't ever change, but making sort of bespoke confetti rings is a smaller section of our entire business now. And everything else within our business is so well honed and so precise that it's only really that sort of that area that we have those kinds of issues with. And I think, yeah, there was definitely teething problems along the way, a lot of them, and I think if we hadn't had those teething problems, would I have stayed so interested and invested? I think the technical aspect and the problem solving and the sort of engineering that's involved in what we do keeps all of us on our toes.
I bet. Let's talk a little bit about your origins. I like an origin story. So I read that your grandma used to take you to the London Craft Show every year back in the UK when you were younger, which I think is such a lovely thing to do. Like, what was your upbringing like creatively? Like, did you always have it in your mind that being creative could be an option for you to make a living when you're older?
Well, I was one of those kids where everyone was like, I mean, it's the only option, So
you're a very artistic, creative child, you mean?
Yes, exactly. So, I think I was always making and drawing, and as so many people that you will have spoken to will say, as somebody with, dyslexia and all of the other sort of wonderful gifts that there are out there, when you find something that you can do that you can't get wrong, it is so glorious. And so you just keep going in that direction. And I think that's why there's so many creatives who are dyslexic, because it's the one thing that they're flourishing at, the one thing that they can't get told they've spelt wrong, So yeah, I mean, I was always very creative. I don't come from a creative family, come from a single parent family. My mum's a dental hygienist. So, that's it. And that was kind of, I think I had a passion for craft. And so I got taken because that was what I loved. It wasn't that everybody else wanted to go.
And so how did you fund your journey into the arts? And and also how did you sort of fund a creative business back then? Do you think it was easier?
Yeah, I think probably I would have to say yes. I'm from the generation of people who were lucky enough to get funding to go to university and grants to go to university. So I lived in, I came from that generation of people, and I think,
It's so lucky, isn't it?
Yeah. It's such a tragedy that that's not available in the same way anymore.
It's shocking. I think I was the last year to get free university tuition. And I got a grant as well. I mean, that's just unheard of now. I'm sure people listening to this will be like, what? Free, especially in America where it just never exists. But
And when you're at the Royal College, they give you a materials grant as well. So you get silver and gold to just...
Oh my God.
I know.
That's incredible. You started making whilst you were at the Royal College of Art in London. And then when did you sort of make a concerted effort to sort of turn this creative endeavor into a proper business?
I don't know that there was ever technically that moment. So I did a degree in jewellery, and then I was sort of making weird sort of art jewellery that was going into Dutch galleries and the like. And then I decided that, I wanted to do a master's. And so I went to the Royal College, and I was making things out of bread, and I was still making weird stuff.
We're making things out of bread.
Yeah.
bread jewellery.
Bread jewellery, porcelain jewellery, things that smashed, things that like...
Oh, it's so nice to be so free. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was glorious. It was 2 incredible years. And the crystal rings that are now the confetti rings were sort of a side project that came out of that. And then I was working, when I graduated, I was lecturing. I was working at Holloway Prison, teaching craft to young offenders and women in psychiatric unit. And then I had a job as a technician in a college in Holloway. And I was doing all of that to support making what I did. Oh, and I was working at Electrum.
So you were working all the jobs.
I was working all the jobs, every single type of job that you could.
All the jobs, all the hours.
All the hours. And I lived in a boat so that I didn't have any rent.
Amazing. A houseboat. I'm imagining a houseboat. Okay, yeah.
When there was no boats on the canal for those London people, if you can imagine. It was, I think I was mentioning this to you when I saw you last, wasn't I? That it was just me and all the old people polishing their brass. There was just this one like little hippie kid bobbing about.
That's so 90s of you to be living in a houseboat, studying. I mean, I bet there is nobody studying in MA at the Royal College living in a houseboat now.
No, probably not.
Unfortunately, those days are over.
Those days are gone. So I remember we were talking about this, like there's been a couple of jumping off points, but I remember after I had my first daughter in 2010, and going back to work, getting to the point that I needed to go back to work, and my partner and my mum sitting me down at dinner and saying, you're all right. You don't need to go back to work. You can do this. You're making enough money now from this jewelry to not have to go back to work. And it was such a huge leap. And I remember sort of bawling my eyes out at the table with fear, but making that step, So I guess that was kind of 4 years after I'd graduated. And to sort of also go back to your question about when it became a business, I remember at that point, or sort of subsequently, people saying to me like, why I didn't come up with a name for my brand. And it's because it never was a brand, it was just me selling stuff. And I think it was only really when I moved here to LA that I had to sort of consolidate in a very new way, the sort of fear of the IRS and being in a sort of unknown legal territory really made me have to sort of structure things in a different way.
Let's talk a bit about your customers and your audience, because I was having a nosy around on your Instagram, and your customers are so engaged. Like they're so sort of vocal on your page and, commenting and liking and just, they just really want a piece of it. So I was really impressed. How would you describe your customers? What are they like? A typical Polly Wales client?
I don't know that there really is one. I think by and large, we're still sort of a self-purchasing brand. Women who appreciate something that's kind of a bit different, and so we have a lot of kind of people who are finishing their PhD in something totally incredible and wild and buy themselves a piece to congratulate themselves for making that that leap, you know. And I think there's a lot of creative people that we work with, but just so many sort of stunningly intelligent, intellectual women as well that sort of always blows my mind, you know.
Yeah, it was so nice when we met in London, and I was accidentally there at the same time as two customers who had come to pick up stuff, and they were so different, but in terms of their kind of demographic, I guess, like one was a 50-year-old buying herself her 50th birthday present, and then the other was a much younger girl. But it was so, I don't know, it was sort of really nice to see those two really different types of people connect over your work. How do you think that customers find you in the first place? Like, especially when you were first starting out, do they find you on social media, or I guess they found you in store back in when you first started?
I grew up as part of the sort of social media generation, really, I suppose. And so I had an Instagram account really pretty early on, and I gained a lot of followers sort of in that way, I think. Now I think that's kind of stagnated because I'm not playing the game in the way that Instagram wants me to play the game. But those people that are there are sort of very, like you say, very loyal, engaged followers. And I used to do the UK craft scene. You know, I used to do Goldsmiths and Collect and the Chelsea Craft Fair when it became, you know, crafts or whatever. I think a lot of people find us now through Pinterest.
Yeah, Pinterest is really good for traffic. I do think doing some in-person events when you're in this first sort of 5 years is so useful, though, just to kind of meet people and just see what potential customers are like, and also see what people are drawn to as well. I think it's probably really a really useful thing to do. And what's your sort of breakdown in terms of like bespoke work, or I mean sort of like commissioned work, or wholesale versus direct to customer?
At the moment, I think we're sort of about 20% wholesale and 80% retail, which is incredible because pre-COVID, those numbers were switched. We had like 60 wholesale accounts, I think.
Right. So you pulled that right back.
There was this moment I was here downtown, and it was before anyone knew about words like furloughed. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember when no one knew the word furlough?
I haven't heard it for a while, but yeah.
And so I was downtown, and we'd just gone to Paris, and we'd just done a show, and I'd got all of my orders, and, you know, everything was kind of shutting down and COVID was starting to kick off. And I thought, the moment that one particular store in particular, when they cancel their order, I know this, you know, this is for real. And I looked around and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have the funds to sort of bankroll whatever this is going to be. Anyway, it was terrifying. But, you know, shortly after that moment, like the next month and the month after, all of these people who wanted to support the arts came out of the woodwork and bought pieces. And it got us through that first really scary moment of COVID.
So they bought pieces directly from your website?
Yeah, from me. People were sort of like, you know, I had ladies in Brentwood saying, come over to my house. I want to shop. And I want to support what you're doing. I want to support jewelers in this time. And so that was kind of like the first wave. And then this is a long-winded answer to your question. And then the second wave was that sort of wave of women who are like, I'm not going to St. Kitts or, you know, Barbados this summer, so I'm going to buy myself some incredible luxury jewelry. And so I had this kind of 18-month or 2-year period of time when I gained a whole new confidence and a whole new client base. And So I sort of ripped the rug out from underneath my feet and cut the majority of our wholesale accounts. And that was a bit bold, you know. It took a couple of years. It took a couple of years, yeah, to sort of like rebound from that moment, but it was worth it.
So how many wholesale accounts do you have now?
10.
Oh, wow. My God, that is a huge change. And do you do any shows still?
No.
None at all.
No.
Wow.
So liberating.
Yeah. You've just brought it all more inwards.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about something that you mentioned earlier, which is a brand, the idea of a brand. I'm obsessed with branding. I could just talk about it all the time. I'm just a real geek I find it really interesting why some people are drawn to certain businesses and not others. You know, you can be selling like a really similar product, but then there's something about the way that product is presented that just really resonates, with them, and they feel like really emotionally connected. I think also that you've really sort of redefined the category of fine jewelry, not only sort of how the actual piece looks and how we kind of think like an actual piece of fine jewelry should look, but also from a branding perspective, like how that piece can be presented to you. Obviously, you know, your work is in the thousands of dollars. So it's a luxury purchase, but I just love the way that you present it. Your website is a wild ride, and I was having a good look around it, and it's such a breath of fresh air in an industry where I just feel like everything is looking so similar. How did you get to this point now where everything is just so kind of unapologetically you, I guess?
Well, thank you. I think in truth, that moment also came with that moment in COVID, you know, when suddenly I wasn't having to sort of kowtow to any external sort of expectations. And, you know, I came from the English craft scene, and, you know, I came from a world where everybody has a white website with grey font and everything's just sort of, you know, very nice and very polite and
very clean,
very clean
and very simple. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and when we got the opportunity to, when I say rebrand, we'd never actually branded to begin with, but when we got the opportunity to rebrand, it was at a point at which I knew who I was. I knew what I wanted to say. I could only sort of speak truth to what that was. And it was easy. You know, I did it with my partner, James. I mean, obviously we had someone sort of actually building it and designing it, but my partner, James, is punk as fuck and, you know, and keeps us sort of very true to our principles. And so it was really easy to build it with him as well, because we just sort of knew that we had to make it reflect who we are. And I think I've always been an outsider in our industry. And I was an outsider in the jewelry craft scene in the UK. You know, my aesthetic has always been from the outside. You know, obviously now there is a world of jewelry that has sort of been spawned from the aesthetic that I created. Yeah, you know, I've always been an outsider. And so...
Do you still feel like an outsider now in the industry?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, I think so. You know, and even when I started doing my jewelry degree, the idea of making sort of pristine, beautiful, shiny things just didn't resonate with me, didn't look right on my body, didn't sort of fit with who I was. And so from the very start, I wanted to make things that when I put them on my body, they sang, you know, instead of making me feel like I needed to be more pristine and I needed to be something I wasn't. And so I think that sort of has just evolved. And I guess there's a lot of people who feel the same as me.
There really are. And actually, when I started my business, my other business, the Cut London, your jewellery and your engagement rings, they weren't typical, but they really pushed me to think about, and were one of the reasons why I started that business. They really pushed me to think about why we all just, think that our only option for this moment in our life is, a typical solitaire diamond engagement ring. I found it so inspiring and to question that idea of, well, why should it look that way? Isn't that weird that we all have the same thing? That's so weird. And I feel like now, 15 years later or whatever, that I'm still trying to convey that message to all the jewelers that I work with on GoldDust. I'm like pleading with them, please, like, show me who you are. Show me who you are through your work and don't hold back. People can find that quite nerve-wracking. Do you feel quite exposed being the kind of embodiment of your business?
Yes and no. Yeah, I mean, yes, because, it's always my name above the door. It's always me. It's always me every day when I come to work, and as somebody who's sort of naturally introverted, being sort of front of house was not the plan. Like, I chose to be a jeweler because you hide in the corner and you make things by yourself. Because that's where I'm happiest, So in that way, very much yes. But on the other side, I guess, no, because I guess to some degree, once I'd stopped trying to sort of fit in so much, it was an awful lot easier.
Did it feel risky to kind of fuck around with the fine jewellery world?
I mean, I wasn't part of it. So, and I think it's not as if I had something that I didn't have anything that I was risking, because I had nothing. So, I had nothing to lose. And I had no other sort of options. This is what I could do and this is what I made. So that was that. And it was an absolute astonishment to me and to, and to everybody around me that, that it flourished. Not because people had doubted me or not because I didn't have the skills or something, but who would have thought that rings that were designed to fall apart and break would spawn this incredible journey that I've been on.
I always find it so fascinating how, like, creative people and artists can take something that they've made kind of for themselves and, like, as a sort of experiment and an exploration into their craft, and then go on this journey. And I mean, only the really successful people can do that, and I put you in that category, and then present it in this really, like, professional and commercial way, in the confines of a business. And I think that's what I was trying to convey to you when we spoke last time about what I can see in common with all the sort of successful jewelers that I know, is that ability to still maintain that, like, creative heart and authentic soul of the business, but then be able to, like, roll it out in a professional way so that people can buy it. What things do you think you've done to your to your art to make it commercial? Like, how have you, like, quite consciously added sort of more commercial decisions along the way? Maybe in, like, terms of adding more product or different types of products. Like, do you have any sort of strategic decisions based on, the experience of the industry as you go?
Again, strategy is not, it's not a buzzword around here. What I have learned is that every time I've tried to make a tiny little huggy hoop or the thing, that's not what people want from me. either because I can't compete with the prices that people can do that for when they're, not producing everything in house, or it's, I'm not a fashion brand. Knowing that, again, is sort of super liberating. I don't look outside.
You don't want to compete for those things either. You just don't know. It's a fool's errand to try and compete on that level, I think.
One of the things that now, sort of 15 years in, or however many years in it is, we have such an incredible collection of sort of hero pieces. And that's taken, all of these years to build up, confetti rings, the skulls, the padlocks, all of these things that are now sort of so core to what we do. And if you had applied any metrics to sort of the majority of those pieces, we'll trial them for 3 seasons and see if they work, blah, blah, blah. They wouldn't have stuck around by and large. The skull ring, for example, is now our second best selling piece. It's in our branding. It's front and center of everything that we do. And that was actually a piece totally made by James that got absorbed into, our collections. And when we first started showcasing them, everybody was like, yeah, no, we're not going to sell skull rings. We're not a skull ring brand. I don't know who you think those are for, but they're not for us. And it took, I think, about 5 years before people started really buying into them. If we'd have been strategic, if we'd have applied metrics, if we'd have sort of done anything like that, those pieces wouldn't have had the life that they have.
But you've kind of like accidentally created then these body of like sort of signature hero pieces. I run collection range planning courses and tell people all the time, like, you got to have your hero products. Like, what are you going to be known for? What are people going to come to you for? And you've not only got your really distinctive aesthetic, as in the cast not set look, but then you've got all the pieces that those are made in. It's great that you can own all these brand assets, to give you a strategic phrase for it. I think that really sort of sets you apart from other brands in that you've got your own actual physical look of the pieces and then this set of these sort of icons. But did you make them thinking, I guess you didn't make them any strategy thinking, we need something with this kind of meaning or this kind of price point?
It's interesting talking about collections. I remember reaching a point in sort of my career, probably when we'd moved here, we'd been here for a little bit, and I was still sort of doing everything one of a kind. And I was just, making whatever I wanted to make, and then I'd make the next piece, because there's every piece sort of leads on to the next one in some sort of way. And so I was making that. And then, we decided that we were going to move into this kind of collection based sort of strategy. And I really sort of remember having a moment of going like, oh yeah, that's what people do, isn't it? They like design a whole collection, they make all the things, and then they launch with a collection.
Build it out.
Yeah, right. I was like, well, I wish I had done that. I'd had a moment when I wished that I'd done that. And then, so when we started doing, as things evolved, we did start moving into sort of doing collections. And those collections would much more be sort of tied up with an aesthetic or a theme more than sort of anything else. But for a hot minute, for a couple of years, we did have a sheet with price points and what's our stud earring that's this amount of money, and what's our hero pieces. And we played that game for a sort of hot minute. And then
what happened?
I think COVID.
But you still have a sort of structure, and because you still have your hero pieces, the loose collections. It just all feels so cohesive. It's so satisfying at doing what I do, looking around your website and being like, oh yes, I see they've done that in that colorway, at this price point. Excellent.
Well, we do 2 market launches for our 10 accounts twice a year. And those 2 bodies of work don't necessarily have to relate to sort of other higher end creative adventures that we go on anymore, which is really nice. And to some degree now, just sort of talking shop, proper shop, we've got this, we've got all these hero pieces, and it's almost hard to be able to fit more on a line sheet. How do you take the rainbow padlock away? How do you take a confetti skull away? You can't. So this season, we did do the thing with the colorway, which was really great. We came up with a new colorway, and it just meant we could kind of go, you can have all of these things in this fantastic new colorway. As we sort of say, like, we put a donk on it, we could just put a donk on it. And that was really great. And often those things just lead into other really clear, obvious decisions. It can be really kind of quick at that point to know, oh yeah, this colorway really worked. We didn't manage to do all of these things in that. So let's add those for the next collection.
I think when you get to the level that you're at, it looks to me anyway, it looks really clear as to what your core pieces are, what your best sellers are, and your signature collection. And so then you can, like, I guess, like you say, you can have a bit of fun and play with the colorways and like add little flourishes, or the donk, as you call it, the donk, which I guess is adding that, that sort of newness that people want. How do you feel about the sort of copycat element of your work? Not in a way that, like, I'm saying that people are directly ripping off your work, but there's a lot of similar stuff going on. How do you feel about that?
I mean, on the one hand, it's pretty fucking cool, right? I mean,
it is. That's very positive of you, but yeah, it is.
It's really, really amazing. I think so many of the people that are doing what they're doing don't know that where it came from, and so much of the aesthetic and the techniques that are involved in it now are just they're just given. People teach cast in place workshops. People who are writing books on cast in place are coming to me asking me if I would like to submit something. And I'm like,
I created that trend. I started this whole thing.
Yeah.
That is flattering. I can see how that would be kind of slightly amusing for you. What do you feel about the sort of, I want to talk a little bit about like rule breaking, but in terms of materials. So do you use 18 karat gold across all your work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how important is that to you as like a material? Do you feel like, I know a lot of jewelers worry about like, oh, is it confusing if I use 9 karat? Is that real fine jewelry? Like, how do you feel about materials and what you should be using or what you want to be using?
I mean, I started using 9 karat until I was able to use 18 karat, particularly for us, because there's such an incredible amount of labor and craftsmanship and skill and experience that goes into every single piece. To use any other material would sort of just negate all of that craftsmanship. The two things sort of naturally are wedded. And I think it's the same, to be able to do what we do and for it to be the quality that it is, we have to use high quality stones. And so to then use high quality stones and have all of this craftsmanship and all of this labor and not be using a material that sort of supports that.
Do you mean like supports that financially? Like it wouldn't be worth trying to sell that, all the work that goes into it for a 9 karat price?
Yep.
I see. So what do you feel about materials like lab grown diamonds?
I don't really feel anything about them. I mean, they're not something that I've embraced. And when clients come to us, we sort of try to steer them in a different direction. I think there's sort of so much greenwashing that goes on around things like lab-grown diamonds. I think there's so much greenwashing in our industry anyway. We use recycled gold, which is mostly post-industrial. And I think that that's really cool that it's post-industrial. You know, it comes off circuit boards or whatever it comes off. And I've seen people who use recycled gold, but then only will term it as sort of repurposed heirlooms. Like, no, it's not. We all know that that's not where it's coming from. So why do you have to spin a story when actually it comes from a really cool place with a really cool story already? You know, I kind of feel like that about so many things within our industry. And the stones that excite me when people want to work with diamonds are the ones that have character and the ones that have nature and the ones that, you know, may already have a story behind them. So that's really sort of what I try to direct people towards.
So do you make everything in-house now? Is it all done in... Oh
yes.
My God. So have you got a huge production space, like a huge workshop?
We moved studios this year. We've got a 3,000 square foot space with workshop and photography and a showroom and sales office. And then I'm in my personal design space, which is the first time I've ever had that, which I share with my partner. And then we have a metal and woodworking studio at the end. And then we also have space where we do the casting, which is off-site. So yeah, everything, including our casting, start to finish, is made here. We have 2.5 people doing the wax sculpting as well as me. And then we have 4 goldsmiths. You're still hands-on with the making on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
What does your day sort of typically look like then in terms of running this level of business?
I would say that by and large, for the last however many years, in reality, I've been able to be at the bench sort of 2 or 3 days a week. And then for the last couple of years, the goal has been to not be doing production. And so now I don't do production anymore, which is great because I've made so many of these things so many times. I don't want to make them anymore. And so now I make, you know, the new design pieces and one of a kinds. And the goal really is that I make something once and then I can hand it over to somebody else and to replicate, and I don't have to make it a second time, so I can do new things. And now I'm hoping to sort of move that on again, to be able to focus on really having a sort of a creative practice that's sort of 5 days a week.
So how many people are in your team altogether then?
I think there's 14 of us.
For an independent jewellery brand, that's a lot of people. Do you remember who the first person you hired was?
Yes, of course.
Of course. I rephrase that. Who was the first person you hired?
Karen, who was the year below me at the Royal College. She was the first person that I hired, and she worked part-time for me. Coming back again to being dyslexic, one of the things that she also did for me was to help support with the paperwork. And I think if I hadn't been in a position or forced rather, to get the support in that direction of my business, I don't know that I would be where I am. Because I think so many people, so many independent designers grow, and then the decision that they make is to sort of hand off the bench work and to do the sort of administrative stuff. And then they find themselves totally kind of lost down that avenue. So I feel like, you know, it was a blessing and a curse, but it helped me make this sort of one decision very early on, which was that I always needed to be at the bench, and there wasn't really any value in me being in any other position.
How have you managed all the financial side along the way? Have you had like investment or support? No, so it's just totally self-funded from scratch.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. That's like a true independent business.
Yeah.
That's very impressive. What do you think has been the biggest thing that you've done then for your business? Like, what would be the biggest catalyst for growth over the last 20 years? I feel like you're going to say moving to the US.
Yeah.
So that was the best business decision.
It was wild then, and it's still sort of wild now. We were talking about it the other day. I think we gave everybody 2 weeks money for an Airbnb. We moved like 8 people over here or something like that.
Oh my gosh. You moved 8 people from the UK?
Yeah.
To the US. That's very brave. I mean, obviously it paid off tenfold.
The aspect of it being people's lives, like when we left England, it was an adventure that we were all going on, and we got to America. And I think at that point, James and I realized, oh, we're really responsible for these people in a whole new way. You know, when everyone was like, where do I buy a pint of milk? I was like, I don't know. I just got off the plane as well. You tell me.
You seem, from what you've told me, like you kind of thrive on that adventure and the sort of like, well, I'm just going to have to see what happens next and see how I can make it work.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think, you know, James and I joke about the fact that if anything ever looks kind of stable and settled, we end up breaking it. I might say that as I have recently entered my 50th year on planet Earth, I'm ready for a little bit of calm and stability now.
A little bit. I mean, it doesn't feel very on brand, to be honest, Polly. I also feel like as we get older, we kind of give less of a fuck really about what we sort of feel like we should be doing, which I think has obviously is what you've been doing for a while. Just, you know, breaking the rules. Or fuck the norm, as it said in an email and on your website.
Yeah.
that I got from you. Obviously, this podcast is called GoldDust, which is the name of my business. Do you have like some little nuggets of intel, some gold dust that what advice would you give to jewelers starting out now who are perhaps struggling as independent designers?
I think you just have to be true to what you believe in. And I think it's a really, really, really incredibly, incredibly hard industry to succeed in and flourish in, especially if you're an independent designer, because there's so many people that are coming at it, you know, with, you know, a juggernaut of cash behind them who are able to do whatever they want to do with whatever, you know, giant rocks and whatever they want to use. So, you know, I think you have to be true to yourself and make the things that you really, really want to make. Because if you fail being true to yourself, at least you know that you've done yourself justice and you've been honest to yourself, instead of sort of trying to fit into a mold and then finding that doesn't work and sort of wishing that you'd done something differently.
I totally agree. And you've done such an amazing job of being so true to yourself, and it has paid off because your work is gorgeous. Thank you so much for all this time you've spent talking to me. It's been so great, and I really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll be able to get over to LA one day and see your vast 3,000 square foot space.
Yeah.
See some more of your pieces in real life. Thank you so much, Polly. It's been brilliant.
It's lovely talking to you. Thank you for having me.